All right. Father in heaven, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and to talk to your people. Thank you that we have that freedom. Jesus, thank you for coming and dying on the cross for us and giving us an opportunity to just let go of our burden, let go of our guilt, let go of our shame, and give it to you. Thank you for dying for our sins and then giving us hope in the resurrection that we will rise from the dead with you and that we will live a full life with you in life after death, that we will be able to enjoy you and the way that you have created us and to enjoy our family and our friends and our community and continue to do the work that you have probably laid out for us. Holy Spirit, I ask that as we wrestle with Isaiah, as we wrestle with text, as we wrestle with your words, that you would give us courage to take a moment to think about what you're doing and saying and to apply it to our life and see how it might transform us into your likeness. And I ask that in your holy name. Amen. All right, so I want to jump right in and talk to you about what a prophet is. And I think most of us, at least when we've heard about church, or maybe we've read a little bit of the Bible, or maybe we've read a lot about the Bible, then we know at least that there's these guys who are prophets and that they say things and do things. So I think I'm going to give you a definition of what a prophet is, and then I'm going to give you in that definition a definition of what prophecy is. So here's what a prophet is, and this is for the Old Testament and the New Testament, and we'll talk about those in a minute. A prophet is a man or a woman who announces God's, and this is the important part, relational view of present and future sin. Okay? His relational view, meaning how it impacts him, and sin's consequences, and God's restorative plan. Okay? So here's what a prophet does. A prophet says, here's how God is experiencing your present sin. Here's how God's going to experience your sin if you continue doing it. Here's the consequences for your sin. And here's how God's going to fix the relationship. That's what a prophet does. Okay? Today, we are in the prophet Isaiah. The prophet Isaiah is in the Old Testament. Shorthand, Old Testament is God's story with his people Israel. Their relationship, their interaction, their worship of him, his pursuit of them. That's the story. The New Testament is Jesus and the church. That's shorthand for both of those. There's a lot more complexity to that. But for today, we are going to find ourselves in the Old Testament reading the prophet Isaiah. And the prophet Isaiah is 66 chapters. And so we call him a major prophet. Now, you might hear people say things like the minor prophets and the major prophets. The way that you distinguish between a minor prophet and a major prophet basically is minor prophets, we didn't collect as much of their sermons into one place, and so they're short. Major prophets, we collected a lot of their narratives and sermons, and so they're major, they're long. And Isaiah is really, really long. Now, Isaiah, it's pretty cool, because some people call Isaiah the fifth gospel. All right? And the reason that they call it the fifth gospel is that the New Testament writers quote Isaiah 60 times, and they quote from 47 different chapters. There is only one other book that the New Testament writers and Jesus quote from more, and we've already covered that one. It's the Psalms, right? And there are 150 chapters in the Psalms, so maybe they have the opportunity to quote more from that. But here is what the gospel writer John said about Isaiah. So I'm just going to read John chapter 2, verse 12, verse 41, but I have the context on the slide. So what's happened here is that the people are so stubborn and they won't listen to Jesus. And so John quotes out of Isaiah 53 and Isaiah chapter 6. And then he says this, and this is important about the book of Isaiah. He says, Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. So immediately you have to understand that if you're a follower of Jesus and if you are part of the church, the way we read Isaiah in particular is from this lens of it's all about Jesus. There's tons and tons of stuff about Jesus because Isaiah saw the glory of Jesus and spoke about it. Okay? My wife says that this is her desert island book because it's such a beautiful, beautiful book. And very, very powerful. But it's also daunting. If you were to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to tackle the major prophets, so I'm going to jump into Isaiah, that's 66 chapters. And I think if you were to read the book of Isaiah, you might not actually completely understand it. You would see that it's beautiful poetry. You might even think, that sounds like a song. My church has written a lot of songs out of this. You would see these repeated patterns, and you would think, wow, this is interesting, but I don't know if I understand all of this and how it's collected. Well, here's the first thing you need to know. Isaiah is a preacher, and Isaiah spoke and spoke and spoke and spoke. And in fact, his second wife was also a prophetess, so they probably had their own band, and they went around preaching and singing and telling everybody kind of bad things. But what you need to know is that this book, this collection of 66 chapters, is the best of Isaiah's stuff put together. It's poetry, it's oracles of judgment, it's songs, it's hopeful stuff. All right, so here we go. If you open the book of Isaiah, you know he's a prophet. You know that means that this book that he's writing is going to be about God's view of a particular people's sin and the consequences for that sin. And on top of that, what God is going to do to restore them. So you know that. Now we need to kind of know a little bit about who Isaiah might be writing to. So I'm just going to read from the slide that I put up so that you kind of have an idea of who he's talking to. So the book of Isaiah belongs to the latter days of the divided kingdom. Okay, Isaiah was a preacher and prophet to the smaller kingdom of Judah. So Israel, the nation of Israel, had King David, King Solomon. After King Solomon, there was a little bit of issue with Solomon's son, and so the country split into two. Israel, 10 tribes, and Judah and Benjamin, they're the smaller part of Israel, and they have the capital city, Jerusalem. So Isaiah and all that he's talking about is going to Jerusalem and to Judah. This is this nation that he's speaking to. This is where he's at, and he actually has access to the kings. All right, so we saw the capital city is Jerusalem. Isaiah helped prevent Judah's captivity and exile by Assyria when the Assyrian king Sennacherib invaded the land during Hezekiah's reign. And this is key, and you're going to have to do some Googling and research because I don't have time to do this. But what you need to do is look at 2 Kings and look at 2 Chronicles and line it up with Isaiah so you kind of have the history of where Isaiah is, but you'll get the story of Hezekiah in 2 Kings 17 to 20, and 2 Chronicles 26 to 32, and in Isaiah 36 to 39. All right, but however, Isaiah's ministry began 47 years earlier in the last year of King Uzziah, Hezekiah's great-grandfather. Isaiah's work spanned the reigns of 4 kings in Judah. Now, just a little side note on all of this. It spanned 4 kings, but Hezekiah was most likely the last one. But there is some thought from the reading of Isaiah that maybe he lived into Manasseh's time, Hezekiah's son, and the way he died was he was possibly, according to Jewish legend, sawed in half. So if you go to Europe and you see on all of the paintings in the cathedrals someone sawed in half, most likely that's Isaiah, okay? Because it went into church legend too. So got cut in half. So there's a little side thing. Okay, so here we go. We know Isaiah is a prophet. We know he's talking about sin, consequence, and restoration, in particular, God's relationship with the people of Israel and Judah. But we kind of need to know the theme of this book, right? Because we got 66 chapters, and you kind of want to know what it's talking about. And you can get lost in it if you don't understand what's going on. So I'm going to give you the 2 major themes. So the first theme is judgment. And chapters 1 to chapter 39, all judgment. 80-20. 80% judgment, 20% hope. All right? So if you started reading it from chapter 1, you might not make it to chapter 39 because you're like, oh my gosh, everything is bad, always bad. And then all of a sudden you hit chapter 40 to 66, and the theme is redemption and restoration. You can choose either word for the theme, but it's redemption and restoration. And what's interesting, at chapter 40, there's like a linear break, just for those of you who want to know, that it's 100 years after Isaiah died. So it's talking about the Babylonian exile, and there's all this talk about the Messiah and the messianic hope and God coming to deliver them and deliver the world from oppression. And so this gets more happy and more exciting. Now there's judgment in it, but now it's flipped. It's 80-20 hope, restoration, redemption, and only 20% judgment. Right? So it flips. So you'll find that a lot of people who quote Isaiah prefer to quote the chapter 40 and up versus the earlier ones. Now people do quote the earlier ones, but people really love the later ones. Why? Because they have all these conversations about Jesus, and we'll get there. All right, so here we go. Before we jump in, Isaiah is a prophet. He's in the Old Testament. He's going to talk about God's relationship and experience of people's sin and the consequence of that sin and how God wants to restore relationship. This particular book is about judgment and restoration, which follows the theme. Now, before we jump in to some ways of reading it, some of you are going to be like, okay, but I want to go a little deeper. I really do want to try to take on Isaiah. Right? I want to take it on. Now, I feel like sometimes when you read major prophets, and I feel like this more about Ezekiel than I do about Jeremiah and Isaiah, but it's kind of like that obscure book you're assigned in high school that you really don't want to read, but when you start reading it, it becomes interesting to you. And then when you're an adult, you feel kind of cool to say you actually read the book and understood what it was talking about. Well, sometimes Isaiah can feel like that, but Isaiah shouldn't. Isaiah is an amazing book that I hope that you will decide to dig a little deeper in. So to help you dig a little deeper, what I would like you to do is, if you have your Bible or a Bible app, like the notes section somewhere, here's what I want you to do. Is I want you to break it down into these sections. These are my sections. They're not anybody else's. So you might find other people breaking them down a little differently. But I broke it down so that when you're reading, okay, oh, I'm here. Oh, this is what's happening. And you'll begin to have like at least a springboard to start doing some research, trying to figure out what's happening, all right? So chapters 1 to 6 are the introduction to the book and Isaiah's calling. So introduction and calling. Chapters 7 to 27 are signs and judgments of the nations. So it's a sign to Israel and judgments of the nations. Okay? That's chapter 7 to 27. Chapters 28 to 33 are the judgment of Israel in particular. Chapters 34 to 39 is the judgment of the entire earth, a sign to Israel and a blessing. All right? And that's where you're going to see Hezekiah being delivered from Assyria. Then we jump into 40 to 48, and this is being delivered from Babylon and the return from exile. And 49 to 57 is a redemption from sin. And then 58 to 66 is restoration of all things. So write these down, because as you read them, and or when you heard me saying Isaiah 61 and you're listening to those words, you can be like, oh, this is a song about the restoration of all things. It's a good way to begin to just kind of frame understanding Isaiah. Okay, so here we go. We're just going to review it again before we jump in how to kind of analyze things a little deeper. Number one, Isaiah is a prophet. A prophet tells people God's relational view of sin and its consequences and how God is going to restore those people. All right? So, here's what I want to do to help you look at Isaiah. We're going to look at three things, and I hope I can get through this without going too long. First, we're going to look at Isaiah's calling. And Isaiah's calling is one form of a lens in this sense. Isaiah's calling is how we're supposed to respond to Isaiah while we read his preaching. Isaiah's calling is how we're supposed to respond to God when he appears and says things in the book of Isaiah. All right? And so, as a 21st century person following Jesus, Isaiah's calling is an instruction how you and I are to interact with God. Right? So we're going to talk about that. Number 2, we're going to talk about how we look at Isaiah, or why we would look at Isaiah as a place where Jesus reappears over and over again. Why is that so important? How Jesus affirms that Isaiah is talking about him, and why we would look at it from that lens. And then number 3, we're going to look at chapter 1, which is a summary of the entire book of Isaiah. And we're going to go all the way through it and show you how you can read it and dissect and understand how to respond to the book of Isaiah. All right, so let's start with Isaiah chapter 6, our instruction on how to respond. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on the throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. So those are angels. With 2 wings they covered their face, and 2 wings they covered their feet. And with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. The sound of their voices, at the sound of their voices, the doorsteps and the thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. So immediately, God appears, and you're going to see this over and over in Isaiah, and he appears relationally. That's important. In this particular way, he appears as holy, right? There's a proclamation of his holiness. Now, holiness is he's other, he's perfect, he's not me, right? He's completely not me. But what's important is it says what does it say about his glory? The whole earth is full of his glory. When you hear glory, you have to hear the weight of who he is, his relational push towards you. What they're saying is, God is holy and he is everywhere. No one is with excuse of not having an encounter with God. Now, that's God's first introduction. Isaiah responds, and Isaiah's response is the proper response for you and I when we experience God's holiness or are presented with it. He says, Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I am living among people with unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Okay? So our response to reading Isaiah, to the presentation of God's holiness, is to be convicted of our own sin and the sin of the people around us. God's holiness should shake us and confront us with our sin and rebellion. Isaiah responds by oh my gosh, I'm ruined. There's no way out of this. I cannot be with a holy God. Verse 6, God offers Isaiah an invitation. And this is how it works. When you and I respond to holiness by proclaiming our brokenness and our sin, then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it, he touched my mouth and said, See, this touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sins are atoned for. Then I heard the voice of the Lord say, Whom shall I send, and who shall go for us? So, as soon as you and I are convicted of our sin in the presence of a holy God, God moves in to restore us and invite us to be part of what he's doing. And God is always doing things in the context of sending people to do stuff. So you need to know that when God steps in to purify you, when we embrace the cross and are forgiven through Christ's blood, you and I are called to do something. We are invited to go. And that's what happens with Isaiah. God offers him an invitation. So what is Isaiah's response? Well, he says, Here I am. So he says, I'm going to go. Then God gives him instructions. He says, all right, you need to go tell the people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Make the heart of the people callous, make their ears dull and close their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and turn to be healed. Okay, so when we read that, that seems really weird. We're like, what? You're going to go tell people in a certain way to make them so they can't hear, and then they'll get upset so that they won't be healed. That's not, This is poetry. And you have to, as you read Isaiah, what the poetry is saying is that's going to be your experience. That the more you speak about me, the more their ears are going to close up. The more it will be like they don't want to be healed. Right? It's interesting that lots of times when we are convicted by our sin and convicted by the sin of others by having an encounter with God, and God invites us to go and we say we're going to go, it's not really always what we want to do. And it's interesting that Isaiah's response now is, okay, for how long do I have to do this? And this is important. Here's the answer. Until the cities lie ruined without inhabitants, until the houses are left deserted and the fields ruined and ravaged, until the Lord has sent everyone far away and the land is utterly forsaken. And though a tenth remains in the land, it will again be laid waste. But the terebinth and the oak leaf stumps, when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be the stump in the land. Now this is important because this is a foreshadowing of what God's trying to say through Isaiah, is that everything has to be cleared. So the restorative process for the sin of Israel is that Israel has to be cut down to all that's left of them is a stump. And out of that stump will come the Messiah, right? Out of that stump will come Jesus. That's the picture that's happening there. So Isaiah's call is an invitation for you and I to respond to God's holiness. But it is this pattern of God presents himself, Isaiah responds, or we respond. God offers purification and an invitation, we respond. God gives us instructions, we respond. God gives us an explanation of what we're doing. That is the thing that we have to have in the back of our head while we're reading Isaiah. That this, Isaiah is saying, look, this is how Israel was supposed to do it. Like this, like I responded to God. So that's lens number one. Lens number two, in understanding Isaiah as you read it, is you need to understand that Jesus saw himself in Isaiah. He knew that Isaiah was talking about him, and he affirms it. In Luke chapter 4, verses 14 through 21, we find the story where he says, who Isaiah was talking about, the coming Messiah, that's me. Every time you read about the Messiah in Isaiah, you're reading about me, Jesus. This is what he says. In verse 14, this is how the narrative goes. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread through the whole countryside. He was teaching in their synagogues, and everyone praised him. He went to Nazareth, where he'd been brought up, and on the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue as was custom. He stood up and read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoner and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." You can imagine that room was utterly silent because he said, everything that Isaiah has said about the coming Messiah is about me. All the freedom, all the things that are going to happen to him, it's going to happen to me. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, Jesus says, when you read Isaiah, look for me. Look for me. I'm there. I'm there. I'm all over Isaiah. So one of the exciting things about reading Isaiah is finding the pointing to Jesus. So we have Isaiah's conversion that informs us on how we're to respond to God's initiation in our life when he convicts us of our sin. We have this idea that as we read Isaiah, Jesus is going to be present and talked about all over the place. Now let's just look at chapter 1 and see how this works. Because here's the thing. That, by the way, is a common village phrase from Eric. Here's the thing. And it's an important phrase. This is an important thing to understand. Tackling poetry that is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old, which is your sacred text, isn't like reading Go Dog Go. It's difficult, and it can be confusing, and there is cultural barriers, meaning the audience and the prophet are not part of your culture. The poetry style is not part of your culture, and so it can be difficult. So we're just going to walk through it, and I hope to show you a few patterns, and you can begin to kind of get the feel of what it might be like to read Isaiah. So, Isaiah chapter 1, we'll skip verse 1. It tells us when he lived and what kings he lived with. All right, so verse 2, God jumps right in. Hear me, you heavens, listen, earth, for the Lord has spoken. I reared children and brought them up, but they have rebelled against me. Right? So immediately he's saying, my relationship with Judah, with Israel, is that I'm dad and they're my kids, and they've rebelled. So immediately, this isn't, you're all bad, immediately saying there's a relationship going on here. Right? There's a relational engagement happening, and they have rejected me. And he emphasizes that in verse 3. And I just realized the breakdown of this, so you can kind of follow along, and I've broken it down. So this first section, 2-9, is accusation and discipline. So listen, the ox knows its master, the donkey its owner's manger, but Israel does not know, my people do not understand. So they don't even know me anymore. He's like, woe to the sinful nation, a people whose guilt is great, a brood of evildoers, children given to corruption. And here's what they do. They have forsaken the Lord, they have spurned the Holy One of Israel, and they've turned their backs. So they've completely cut off relationship. You know, it's that time when your child just turns around and does not want to have anything to do with you. In the Old Testament, there is a thing called facing. It's the theology of facing. You'll see this. Anytime people in right relationship with God, they're face-to-face with God. Anytime he's talking about them as not in right relationship, they've turned their back, they've rejected, right? So they're no longer face-to-face with him. And so that's emphasized here. He's experiencing that. Now this is interesting. Why should you be beaten anymore? Why do you persist in rebellion? Your whole heart is injured, your whole heart afflicted. From the sole of your foot to the top of your head, there is no soundness, only wounds and welts, open sores, not cleansed or bandaged or soothed with olive oil. Your country is desolate. Your cities burned with fire. Your fields are being stripped by foreigners right before you, laid waste as when overthrown by strangers. And this is then a little maybe, not this part, but daughter Zion is left like a shelter in a vineyard, but like a hut in a cucumber field, like a city under siege. Unless the Lord Almighty had left us some survivors, we would have become like Sodom. We would have become like Gomorrah. And that little verse 9 is like Isaiah's commentary on this. But what God is saying is, I've really loved you. You've been really rebellious. And guess what I've done? I've spanked you so much that you have welts from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head. I have given you timeouts. I've taken everything out of your room. I have, put you on a Velcro wall and not let you move. Like, I've done anything and everything to get you to pay attention and do what you're supposed to do, and you haven't done it. To the point, if I didn't have any mercy, you just wouldn't be. Right? He's like, why are you so rebellious? Right? So 2-9 is this accusation and discipline. Now, this is the next part, and you're going to see this in Isaiah over and over again, is God saying, here's the relational impact. I love this because God is so concerned about how he impacts you and you impact him. And so he says, let me show you what your sin is doing. And this is going to happen all the time in Isaiah, and it should be convicting to us. Starting in verse 10, this is what he says. Hear the words of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Listen to the instructions of our God, you people of Gomorrah. So he's saying, Israel, you've become like the Sodom and Gomorrah that I destroyed. The multitude of your sacrifices, what are they to me? says the Lord. I have more than enough of burnt offerings, of rams, and the fat of fattened animals. I have no pleasure in the blood of the bulls and the lambs and the goats. When you come to appear before me, who has asked this of you, this trampling of my court? Stop bringing meaningless offering. Your incense is detestable to me. New moons, Sabbaths, and convocations. I cannot bear your worthless assemblies. Your new moon feasts and your appointed festivals I hate with all my being. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of them. When you spread out your hands in prayer, I hide my eyes from you. Even when you offer many prayers, I am not listening. Your hands are full of blood. I'm in this, like, it's crazy because he's saying, look, like, I am so upset at what you have done that he says, it's a burden to me. I am weary to bear them. To me, that's just mind-blowing. This is why I love Isaiah, is that God says, look, like, your sin is really hard for me. It's like the parent sitting down with the kid who just keeps running away and keeps doing stuff and says, man, you're breaking my heart. Like, and you pretend like you're not, but you are. And you need to know that you have an impact on me. That's what God is saying through Isaiah to Israel, but he's also saying it to you. Now, in verses 16 to 19, he says, well, this is how you can move away from that. This is how you can move away from that. He says, wash and make yourself clean. Take your evil deeds out of my sight. Stop doing what's wrong. I love that. Stop it. Learn, so there's a process to do what's right. Seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead for the case of the widow. And then he says, come, let us settle the matter, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they are red as crimson, they shall be like wool. And that is a little allusion, because we're looking through this in the lens of Jesus' understanding of Isaiah, to him. That Jesus is the one who's going to make them this way. And then he goes on, verse 19, if you are willing and obedient, you will eat the good things of the land. But if you resist and rebel, you will be devoured by the sword. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. So, I just read 20, but 20 to 23, and here's the pattern. This is what Isaiah does. Here's the long piece of poetry, and it's going to be, here's how your sin, here's how it impacts me, here are the consequences, here's what you can do to fix it, and then he recaps it in a shorter version with new metaphors. And so in verse 21, I really shouldn't make things super small. Verse 21, see how the faithful city has become a prostitute. She once was full of justice, righteousness, used to dwell in her. But now murderers. Your silver has become dross. Your choice wine is diluted with water. Your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves. They all love bribes and chasing after gifts. They do not defend the cause of the fatherless. The widow's case does not come before them. Okay, so here again is a recap of the accusation. Right? Here's how you've been rebellious children. Here are the details. Your rulers are bad. Your economy is corrupt. Everybody's corrupt. This is what's happened. So then he goes and says, okay, this is what redemption and purification is going to look like. Therefore, the Lord Almighty, the Mighty One of Israel declares, I will vent my wrath on my foes and avenge myself of my enemies. I will turn my hands against you. I will thoroughly purge away your dross and remove all your impurities. I will restore your leaders as in the days of old, your rulers as at the beginning. Afterward, you will be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Zion will be delivered with justice, her penitent ones with righteousness. But rebels and sinners will both be broken, and those who forsake the Lord will perish. You will be ashamed because of your sacred oaks, that's your idols, in which you delighted. You will be disgraced because of the gardens you have chosen. This is your fertility spaces, when you're worshiping fertility gods. You will be like the oak with faded leaves, like a garden without water. The mighty man will become tinder, and his works a spark. Both will burn together with no one to quench the fire. And this is the interesting tension. So here's the thing. Redemption's going to happen. God's going to destroy his foes. He's going to fix everything and bring Israel back to where it's supposed to be. But there's also going to be this larger judgment of the world. And so Isaiah is alluding to that, and it's going to get more detailed as he goes on in his book. So, let's just recap everything and close this out. Isaiah is a prophet. He's in the Old Testament. He's a major prophet. His book is basically God's relational view of sin, present and future, and the consequences for that sin, and the process of restoration. That's the message of every prophet. That's in every book of prophecy. In particular, in the book of Isaiah, it is written to the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, in the city of Jerusalem. And to those people, it is a message of judgment and future restoration. My invitation to you is to understand that Jesus appears over and over again in Isaiah, and there is an invitation from Isaiah for us to find him there, to respond to him like Isaiah responded to the holiness of God, and to realize that in Isaiah, the heart of God is present, and we can find his agony over our brokenness and the way it impacts him, and his longing to be in relationship with us. So I hope, at least at some level, I got you excited about reading Isaiah, or at least understanding a little bit of why it is here. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you so much for today. Thank you for Isaiah. Thank you for the opportunity to sing and to worship and to read your scripture. I just pray that you would bless the rest of our time together. Amen.